So for more on this deal, let's speak to Stephen Fish. He's professor of political science at University of California, Berkeley. Professor Fish, good to have you on the show. This feels big, not so much because Mark Rutte calls it a game changer, but more because, it's the first time President Trump has approved sending weapons to Ukraine since he took office. So give us a sense of how significant rather this deal is, and in what ways, Professor?
Arnold, it is significant. We have to remember that Trump, for his whole political career, at least since he ran for president in 2016, has very much been on Putin's side. President Trump has shown fealty to President Putin that he's shown to no one else, even fellow members of the Republican Party in the United States. He's treated Putin as his hero, as his sponsor, and it's puzzled a lot of the world, I think. What we see now, since he came back to office in his second term, is a kind of relativization of Putin. He seems to think maybe that he doesn't need Putin anymore. Remember, Putin helped him get elected in 2016, and then Trump did not win the popular vote. He won the Electoral College in the election. I think back then he thought he was kind of dependent on Putin. Now I think he might feel like he's outgrown Putin. He can do without him and treat him the way he does other world leaders. That said, we have to remember there's a special bond between Putin and Trump. And I don't anticipate Trump taking any actions that are really going to put serious pressure on Putin. Now, what he did today by announcing that American weapons will continue to flow to Ukraine or through European allies to Ukraine is really a big deal. There's no doubt about it. But when he said, Putin has 50 days now to do what Trump wants him to do or to settle the war, or he's going to impose tariffs, we have to remember he's cutting Putin an awful lot of slack. Putin's not going to do anything. He wants to prosecute this war in Ukraine. The question is whether after 50 days, Trump will do anything. And if the past is any guide, he probably won't continue to pressure Putin.
Okay, Professor, I want to talk about the weapons that could be supplied under Trump's pivot. It seems like they're defensive in nature. Just how much battlefield difference can such aid make at this stage of war? And do you think this reflects a calculated effort to avoid escalation?
I'm not sure he's all that concerned with avoiding escalation right now. This was an obsession of President Biden. Biden was foursquare on Ukraine's side and against Putin. That was a traditional kind of American position on a war like this. And Biden was loyal to our allies, including to our West European allies and Ukraine. And remarkably, Putin seemed to want to kind of abandon the democratic world to join Putin's autocracy international as a junior partner. Now that actually does seem to be changing, possibly. We still have to remember, as I mentioned, Trump's fealty to Putin, but these weapon systems actually are important. The Patriot missiles are essentially defensive, but those aren't the only weapons in play here. We're talking also about HIMARS, which have the possibility of striking deep into Russia. The Biden administration was very hesitant to allow the Ukrainians to use weapons that the United States was supplying to strike inside Russia itself. If the Trump administration allowed American-supplied weapons to be used in Russia itself, it would be going beyond the Biden administration in putting pressure on Putin and in aiding the Ukrainians. That would be a remarkable step, but it remains to be seen whether that's going to happen.
Professor Fish, some are already suggesting that this shift, brings Donald Trump closer to Joe Biden in terms of policy towards Ukraine. But there is an important caveat, which I want to ask you about, the fact that the U.S. is going to get paid by the Europeans. Can you help us understand why this is so critical to President Trump?
Yes, Arnold, it is absolutely critical. This is a shift. The United States was giving Ukraine its weapons from our stockpiles for free before. Now Trump is selling these weapons to, reports vary on whether it's the EU or NATO, but at any rate to the Europeans, who will then supply them to the Ukrainians. So this is no longer the kind of aid deal that Ukraine got before, back when Biden was in office. That said, at least weapons get to go to Ukraine, at least eventually. Now, here's the reason why this sounds better and looks better to Trump is he doesn't feel like America is being ripped off anymore. He constantly thinks America is being ripped off by the whole rest of the world, and especially the Europeans, especially our allies, as peculiar as that might seem. But with the Europeans actually ponying up and paying for at least some of the cost of these weapons, Trump can tell himself and tell his supporters, oh, we're profiting from this. We're not being taken advantage of. And for Trump, at least creating that appearance is extremely important.
But I wonder, Professor, will NATO countries willingly buy U.S. arms under Trump's plan? Or could this create sort of fiction, especially among states already hesitant about the cost of the war effort?
Julie, I think they being the European countries, probably will gladly buy these weapons. They want to step up and provide more support for Ukraine. That's become obvious, especially in recent months. General Secretary Rutte of NATO is very much in favor of the Europeans drastically raising the amount of spending they do on their military, creating their own strong militaries. And in fact, let's face it, this would be good for the West. It'd be good for global security to have the Western alliance rest on two strong military pillars. The United States and the EU are both major economic powers, but really it's a one-legged alliance when it comes to military capacity. For the Europeans to spend much more on their own military and to build serious armies, to be quite honest with it, is really important. But right now, the Europeans don't have the production abilities to produce the weapons that the Ukrainians need that the Americans do. So I think that the European countries, using money that they're going to be spending in their enhanced defense spending packages and programs, are going to willingly buy these weapons from the United States and supply them to Ukraine.
All right, Professor, we will have to leave it there. Great talking to you on Asia First today. Thanks very much for that. Stephen Fish is Professor of Political Science at the University of California, Berkeley.